So with the brain having made all the distinctions necessary to have these elements out of which to process this reading challenge, the next stage is automatizing the processing automatically. I mean, you cannot, reading has to happen faster than we can possibly think about. As we've seen, if you go into the speed of processing, whether you look at the speed with which the eyes are moving and infer from that how fast the brain is processing the elements it's looking at, or you come from the sound pathway and you look at it from a timing point of view, the difference between one word and another happening in just these fractions of a second, you begin to realize that the brain is having to deal with all these tiny little parts at incredible speed. It can't just deal with them haphazardly, it has to deal with them automatically, coherently, reliably, in order to take all these elements and generate this internal experience we've been talking about. That whole process of automatizing all of the sub-processes that are involved is key to whether or not this whole thing will work. The most important thing to pay attention to in this conversation about automaticity is that it's really different than the kind of automatic processes that human beings do before they learn to read. I mean, when we learn to walk, we're learning to automate the movement and coordination of all of our parts of our body that are engaged in the process of walking, right? Our feet, our ankles, our calves, our sense of balance, all these things are being automated, made automatic and unconsciously reliable to our intention. But in those cases, and in the case of initially learning speech, learning to speak and listen, the automatic processing that's involved in that has organically evolved. It's evolved over long periods of evolutionary time so that the brain and the world and the behavior have all kind of co-evolved into the shape that they're in today. In the case of the automatic processing that has to happen in the course of reading, there's no such co-evolutionary process. Here we're talking about getting certain already existent automatic processes in the brain to be robotically conscripted to an external technological artifact. In that sense, it's very much like a piece of software. It's getting the brain to act like a virtual machine and like this player piano and generate this internal experience of language according to instructions and information contained in a code and how the brain has been trained to interpret that code. And like in any automatic process, as you heard Terence Deacon speak to, once any one step in the sequence breaks down, the whole thing falls apart. And of course, that's what we experience with struggling readers.